find a way to offer an adjudication system by which it would be more appropriate to bring our cases before a judge, something similar to a small claims court or a special set-aside courts. We're looking at that. We're also trying to get the Comptroller of Public Accounts to not allow the mineral companies to hold the money for 3 years before they report it to the Comptroller's office. We would like it reported the minute they distribute to anyone. So if they have partners or dividends, if they're issuing that money, they need to issue it to the state so the state can then try to find the rightful owner, at least publish the locations. Another thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to get all the state agencies to identify the locations of the minerals with a cross-reference that makes more sense. So what that means is, right now the Railroad Commission calls it well number so-and-so. The Land Commissioner calls it the points on the compass, right? So longitude, latitude. The landmen call it meets and bounds. And then some oil companies just call it by, well number 14. And so it's very confusing. There's not really any good cross-referencing indexes because the Land Commissioner uses a different set of ways to record the locations from the Texas Railroad Commission, who is then, both of them are recording it differently than the way that the Comptroller of Public Accounts records it through the Secretary of State's office. So we're trying to help the state to understand the need to have this as a fully cross-referenced. So if you have one of those three pieces of information, you have them all. So you would know how it's recorded with the Railroad Commissioner, the Land Commissioner, and the Comptroller of Public Accounts. Because otherwise we're just looking everywhere for the same information. And I know this is kind of, perhaps seems discouraging, but actually it's good news because we're identifying the issues to make it easier for us to also make it easier for the state. I hope you can appreciate that. There are a couple of other issues that we're trying to work with to make it again easier to release the funds, and some of this has to do with the whole idea of lineage and heirship and a descendant. You're going to hear some information today from people that are very knowledgeable in this area on what they've done in different locations to try to make that simpler. We're all descendants. There's no question about that. The question is, are we heirs to, and if we are heirs to what? And so that's some of the big mystery that we're all trying to appreciate and get the state and get the counties and the judges to all agree to a same standard of declaring, right? It gets very confusing. Some judges will, some won't, some locations will, some won't. So we're trying to work through some of that. Okay, so it is now 9:20. I would like to Trish, do I have this right? Dr. Gutierrez is supposed to speak now?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure I have this right. So without any further delays, and I'm available to speak to anyone at any time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jose Angel Gutierrez. He's an attorney and professor, founding member of La Raza Unidad, and an author of numerous books concerning Hispanic and Chicano politics. So we're very, very honored to have him here today to speak before our group and to take his time. Dr. Gutierrez? Oh,
well, I know that I'm blessed because I'm at the right place. Look at this. I don't think I've ever in my life had this opportunity to pretend to be a preacher. And because we're at this place, you're going to listen. You've got no choice. I was a little perplexed at the invitation because, as you heard, we're all descendants, but we may not be heirs. And I am not a party of interest. I'm just an interested party. Because every time I look at a map, and sometimes it's hard to find paper maps now, you look at the United States and see the color coding for national and state parks. And show this to your kids, or the teacher. Where did you go? Where did you go? Oh, she's taking care of my books back there. Show it to the kids. 2/3 of the land west of the Mississippi, 2/3 of the land west of the Mississippi is in federal or state parks. I ask you, whose land was that? Whose land is that? No apology, no compensation. And that's the federal government. All right. I was asked to talk about what I would recommend this organization do based on what you heard from the legal perspective, from the Raza Unida organizing politics, that sort of thing. But I also run a foundation, and we do voting rights litigation and some other things, and we're very much involved in the Porvenir case, Mr. Patterson. But on the side of people who are descendants and heirs of those who were murdered there at Porvenir by the Texas Rangers and the United States Army. And we'll have I invite you to join us. We're going to have a demonstration January 28, 2018 on the Capitol steps in Austin to remember that massacre 100 years ago. So I hope that you will join us next January 28, 2018 in Austin, Texas at the Capitol steps to talk about what happened and who did it. Now to the talk. You know, as a teacher, as an organizer, and as a lawyer, and just simply a person that cares, we're way behind the 8 ball. You know, we may have this almost 200-year history of theft, but we don't have no long history of organized, effective struggle against what happened. So I hope that some of my comments are important. I only have 7 points because 15 minutes, and they're kind of straight to the point of what we ought to do to get better organized and coalesce. First, let me point out to you that we do have a problem. The people that study demography tell us that as of right now, as we're standing here and sitting here and listening at the moment and having this conference, we are about 1 in 5 Americans. That's how big our population is in general in the United States. By the time we get to 2020, we probably will be 1 in 4. And by the time we get to 2050, and I know you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get there. It's only 32 years away. You will, most of you will. In 2050, we'll be 1 of 3 Americans. That's a hell of a lot of people. And about 64 to 67%, depending on the immigration, depending on the wall, and depending on the redadas and the deportations, about 64 to 67% of that group, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5, are of Mexican ancestry. That's us. The problem is that this group, this large group, is too dumb, too poor, and too young. Meraneta, too dumb, too poor, and too young. So that's the challenge. We got to fix that, otherwise they're not sirve to have this critical mass of people that are too young, too poor, and too dumb. So we need to start with number 1, leadership renewal. I'm sure you know that we have the best government from the local level to the federal level that money can buy. They're not accountable to us. That's why we started the Raza Unida Party, and that's why Bernie Sanders was talking about that very issue in his campaign. And until we have that change in leadership, they're not going to speak for us. Our national organizations, and I challenge you to prove me wrong. Our national organizations, go to their websites. These are the nonprofits. These are the ones that advocate for us. These are our civil rights organizations, are all our big organizations. Look at their website. do not have a strategic plan. What are we going to do about this critical mass, this large number of people that we're going to be already and greater soon? If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? No strategic plan among our national organizations, the National Council of Raza, NALEO, Texas Mazda, MALDEF, Southwest Voter, you name it. None. Do you? Do you have a strategic plan? How about individually? Have you even taken the time to reflect on what you're going to be doing in 2050 or 2040? Probably the answer is no. So I would suggest that, we begin working on building capacity, skill capacity among our young people, that we begin working on trying to teach systems literacy. What do I mean by that? About 90% of our people know how the world works, but they're talking about their neighborhood or their town. They certainly don't know how to make the world work for them, and never, ever, ever, but about 8% ever figure out how to make the world. And that's what you're trying to do. Make the world. That's 8 to 10% activists are the ones who change the world because they have a vision of trying to make it better. The rest are just simply going along. So what do we need to do? Well, first of all, I would suggest, at the point of almost offending you, and I certainly don't mean it, you will continue your fight, your personal fight, as you have been. But you need to make this public. You need to invite people like me who have no stake in the game as such, except that I'm upset.